welcome back to the Brooklyn Knit Folk Quilt Along tutorial series. My name is Jacqueline. You can find me on Instagram, Ravelry, Pinterest, basically anywhere you try to find me is at Jacqueline Salem. And now we're going to begin the piecing together of the quilt top. So this is my favorite part of it. I can't wait to get started. I've already shown you some kind of basics about how to kind of get your machine ready for this project. Again, if you have any questions, just refer to your your machine manual. It will be better probably at explaining what I've just shown you, and there probably are way better tutorials for how to kind of prepare your machine for a project like this, but I just wanted to include it just in case that it would be helpful for you. So now we're going to begin piecing together the rows. We're going to go from row 1 to row whatever you have. Again, it's probably going to be different for everybody depending on what size of quilt you're making and how you've laid it out. If you can keep your quilt laid out the entire process, like you have an extra room where you can keep it out or you don't have pets that aren't going to mess with it, by all means leave it out until you're ready to do the row you're on, and then stack your row so that you know what pieces you're going in order with. With mine, see if I can grab one real fast. I've stacked my pieces so that the first piece is the far left side and the last piece is the far right side of the row so that I know what order I am sewing in. So I'm going to flip the camera now and we're going to get started on piecing, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's get started. Alright, so got my row ready. The first thing you need to know when you're piecing a quilt together is that when you sew your pieces together, especially this is going to be for a beginner, you will always sew the right sides of your pieces to one another. You will never sew, at least not for this project, you'll never sew the wrong sides together, because once they're sewn, then you'll see the seam in the front. And for this project, we don't want that. So we're going to be sewing the right sides together so that when you sew them together, I'll show you a row I've already done as an example. So that when you sew them together, you don't see the seam. So we're going to take our first two pieces, place them right sides together. I like to, so I know and can keep it in order, I like keeping my first piece on the bottom, my second piece on the top. Line them up. Don't worry about pins for this, really. It's just 6 inches. It's not going to make or break it. Again, gives it character. So line them up. Place on your machine. Make sure you guys can see that. Lower the presser foot. I'm going to be at the edge of your fabric here. Let me take it closer so you can see here. So you want to make sure that your fabric is lined up right up against the edge of either the guide on your presser foot or whatever guide you have taped on to this plate here. So we have our fabric butted up against the presser foot guide or along your tape edge, whichever you're using. The presser foot is lowered down. Now you're going to hold on to these little strings right here. If you have a nicer machine, it's probably not necessary, but I have found with kind of more inexpensive models that if I'm not holding on to these threads, the bobbin thread will get pulled down into it and then you have to bring up your bobbin thread again. It's just kind of a hassle. So hold on to these threads for the first few stitches. And I'm just using a straight stitch, by the way, not a zigzag, just a straight stitch. Nothing too tight, nothing too loose, so kind of somewhere in the middle. Usually they kind of go between 0 and 5. You're going to want something that's probably around a 3, I'm guessing, for the length of your stitch. And then you'll just sew slow and steady, keeping your fabric butted up against the guide or on your tape guide. Checking every once in a while to make sure your fabrics haven't slipped out. Slipped out meaning like that they're like all wonky or anything like that. Raise the foot. There's usually a cutter either on the back, a built-in cutter like on the back of your presser foot, on the side of your machine, kind of up here, or you can just take a pair of scissors and cut it. there we have our first square. And you're just going to keep going like that along the edge, making sure that you're sewing to the correct side. Don't get it flipped around if your pattern goes a certain way. So the next one for me is this one right here. So this is the left side. This is the next one. So this needs to go up against the fabric piece that we just sewed. And again, right sides together. So this is the correct side of the fabric. This is the correct side of this fabric. So we're going to put right sides together on the right edge, because again, sewing left to right. You can see where I didn't cut very well there because it doesn't match up exactly, but you know what? Who cares? And again, we're going to line it up. Lower the presser foot. Hold on to those threads for the first few stitches. Oh, looks like mine isn't right up on it. There we go. Sew along the edge. See, mine's not kind of lined up very well there, so I need to kind of adjust just a little bit. And there we have our third piece. So this is kind of what the back looks like, just to show you that. Should be lined up nice and evenly. If for some reason you're seeing extra fabric up along the edge here, I would definitely recommend taking your seam ripper and ripping out the piece you just did and redoing it. These are 1/4 inch seams, so they are, you know, a little bit on the small side, but you definitely want to make sure that the seams are as even as you can possibly make them, or as consistent, I guess, because it will matter when you're putting the rows together. So it will make your life a lot easier if when you go to sew the rows together that each of your rows individually are fitting together nicely from the start. So, and I'm just going to continue with this row. Once I get to the end of the row, I'm going to take my pencil and mark. I'll show you what I did on this one here that I've already finished. Take your pencil and mark the left side and the row number. That way you can keep them straight later on. You'll always have your picture to refer back to later on, but it's best to go ahead and just mark it for that extra insurance just in case. And I will see you at the end of this row. Also, put some music on, or a podcast, or a TV show or something. I always like to have something on in the background while I work on my projects. If you look down and you see, once you've opened it, that the wrong side of the fabric is facing you, then you know you've sewn it on the wrong way, so you'll need to unpick that. Just wanted to show you this here. See this here? This one's a little bit off on the edge. I could be really picky and unpick that and redo it, but really, as long as it's not like 1/8 of an inch off or something, I'm not gonna bother with redoing it. That's just fine. Basically, moral of the story is don't be too hard on yourself. It's just sewing, it's a first quilt. It's gonna be fine. And there we have it. A full row. And I just need to do that 13 more times because I have 14 rows in my quilt. So once you finish with a row, you just kind of want to inspect it, make sure that there are no gaps in the seams, that you didn't miss anything, and make sure that they're, you know, kind of, the seams are even on the back. Yeah, just do a little bit of an inspection, and then once you're done, take your pencil, mark on the far left side an L for left, and then the row number. So this one for me is the 3rd in the row, so I'm gonna put L3. Make sure you're doing this in pencil or a fabric marker and not a pen, so that when you wash it, eventually it will come out. And that's the finished row, and so we're just gonna keep doing that until all the rows are done. And then what I've been doing is laying mine in the order that I've been sewing them to keep them in order. Again, you have the picture, you'll have them numbered, just that extra insurance, trying to stay as organized as possible. I've already finished 2 rows and I put them face down, so I'll put my row 3 marker face down and then lay that on top of it, so that once I finish, they'll all be in order. So now that we've pieced each row together, the final step before we sew all of the rows to one another is to press the backs of the seams. Now there are two options that we can take here. The first is to split the seam in half. See if I can get my finger in this here. Split the seam in half and iron up the center. The second method, which is what I prefer and what I'll be doing, is to iron them all the same way for the first row and then alternate for each row which way you iron them. So if I iron this first row this way, I'll take row 2 and iron it the opposite way. So that makes sense. That's the last step that we need to do, and then we can sew the rows together. And then finally, the last thing we're going to do to piece together the top of the quilt is to sew each of the strips together. So you'll just sew those in order from the rows. They should be marked on the corner with the pencil like we'd had. And then also you'll have your picture to refer to just in case you get confused, and your post-its, and everything should be in order. So just sew the rows together one by one. And right now that's what I'm doing. So slow and steady. Remember, right sides together. If you're looking, if this top piece that you're sewing right here has the front facing you, then you know you're not sewing it the right way. So you want to sew the right sides together so that when you open it up, the right sides will be facing up. Also, feel free to use pins at this stage. I'm not using pins because honestly I feel like they just get in the way for me. But if you want that extra reassurance, my little pin holder here, you can take pins and before you start sewing, put the pins, or pin the two rows together. And then as you're sewing, remove the pin before it gets to the feed dogs. Make sure you remove those pins before they get in there because that can really damage your machine. So pins are good to help keep your pieces together, but you don't have to use them by any means. So from here we're just going to sew the rows to each other, one after another. They should all be in order, and you'd have several things to refer to by now, like I said. So just sew the rows together until you have your finished top. Here we have the finished top. Really excited about how it's looking. What do you think, Jafar? So here we have the finished top, and this is, again, the size is going to depend on the size that you have selected for your own personal project. And from here, I typically measure the quilt at this point and then order my batting and backing fabric after measuring this top portion here. So that way I don't under or over order backing fabric. And a viewer has suggested that I use a sheet for the back, which, oh my god, brilliant. So if you want to save some dollars, maybe look into getting a sheet for your backing fabric instead of buying a separate fabric, you know, from fabric.com or Joann's or wherever you're purchasing your fabric. So that will save you a lot of money in the end. So thanks for that. I think I'm definitely going to do that for mine. So really excited, and stay tuned for the next step.